From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Ilhan Omar says free universal school meals should be permanent. 16 killed, 83 injured in Chicagoland over July 4th weekend. President Biden appoints Imam Magid to U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Norwegian anti-Islam extremist in car crash after burning Quran. The U.S. says Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Akleh was likely killed by Israel. And our top story tonight. On Friday, Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar said in an op-ed that free school meal waivers to forestall a surge in child hunger should be made permanent. Writing in the Min Post, Omar, who helped negotiate the inclusion of waivers in a sweeping coronavirus relief package, noted that the results were a resounding success in Minnesota and across the country. Originally approved in mid-2020, the waivers have allowed schools to drop regulatory burdens in order to deliver free meals to as many students as possible. Late last month, the House and Senate passed compromise legislation, but that only extends the waivers through the summer instead of coming school year, which the GOP opposed. At least 6 people were killed and 24 were injured in a shooting at a 4th of July parade in Highland Park, Illinois yesterday. That marks at least the 308th mass shooting in the United States this year, according to data compiled by the Gun Violence Archive, a nonprofit group tracking such incidents. A total of 26 patients were received at Highland Park Hospital, according to Dr. Brigham Temple, medical director of North Shore University Health System. The patients ranged in age from 8 years old to 85 years old, according to Temple. Police have identified 22-year-old Robert E. Cremo III as a person of interest in Highland Park parade shooting. In addition to this incident, at least 10 people were killed and 62 others were wounded by gunfire over the 4th of July weekend in Chicago. During last year's 4th of July weekend, 19 people were killed and more than 100 were shot. Khizr Khan, a Pakistani-American Muslim, will be awarded the top U.S. Civil Award on July 7th by President Joe Biden. Khan is the founder of the Constitution Literacy and National Unity Center. He's among the 17 individuals from across the U.S. who will receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom Award this year. Khan rose to fame after challenging former U.S. President Donald Trump on his knowledge of the American Constitution. Their son, U.S. Army Captain Humayun Khan, was killed by a suicide bomber during the Iraq War in 2004. Khizr Khan was born in a small village in Gujranwala, Pakistan, and moved to the United States in 1980. President Joe Biden has appointed Imam Muhammad Magid as Commissioner on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Magid is the Executive Religious Director of All Dulles Area Muslim Society Center in Sterling, Virginia. He's the chairman of the International Interfaith Peace Corps and former president of the Islamic Society of North America. Magid is also the co-founder of the Multi-Faith Neighborhood Network, which focuses on building bridges between Muslims, evangelical Christians, and Jewish communities. He also works with the United Nations Development Program in training imams to deal with violence and extremism against religious minorities in East and West Africa. On Sunday, Ohio authorities released Bodycam footage showing Akron police officers shooting Jayland Walker, a 25-year-old black man, at least 90 times. The Washington Post reports that officers tried to stop Walker's vehicle in the early hours of June 27 to investigate an unspecified traffic violation and chased him when he did not pull over, they said. The Akron Police Department said a gun was fired from the vehicle during the pursuit. Walker's family denies the allegation that he was armed at the time of the shooting. Minutes later, Walker jumped out of the car and ran into a parking lot, with officers following. They're believed to have fired over 90 rounds into Walker. The 8 officers involved in Walker's killings have been placed on paid leave as authorities investigate the incident. Firing 90 times on anyone unarmed is more than excessive. It's inhumane, unjust, and immoral. Dr. N.J. Akbar, president of Akron School Board, said in a statement released Friday. She said the citizens of Akron deserve accountability and immediate transparency. Hundreds of people in Akron gathered outside the police department's headquarters and marched through the city late Sunday, demanding justice for Jayland Walker. A petition calling on Democratic-controlled U.S. House to launch impeachment proceedings against Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is about to reach 1 million signatures. It was posted to the website of progressive advocacy group Move On and currently has more than 989,000 signatures. This was after a surge following the Supreme Court majority ruling in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which ended the constitutional right to abortion last month. The petition also spotlights recent reporting exposing Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas's role in trying to invalidate the 2020 election and keep former President Donald Trump in power. Despite his wife's efforts, which have drawn scrutiny from the House January 6 committee, Thomas did not recuse himself from the Supreme Court cases involving the 2020 election. On Sunday, the Massachusetts chapter of the Council on American-Islamic Relations condemned a march on Saturday in Boston by some 100 members of the white supremacist group Patriot Front. While all Americans, even bigots, have the right to march, people valuing a just and inclusive society also have the right to condemn the hatred those bigots spew and to reject the division they seek, said Cair, Massachusetts Executive Director Tahira Amtul-Wadud. She said that the American Muslim community and Cair stand in solidarity with all those challenging anti-Black racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, white supremacy, and all other forms of bigotry. A Dallas-Fort Worth-based Muslim nonprofit has started a home for elderly women in crisis. The Texas Muslim Women Foundation has launched the Senior Sanctuary. The 8-person home provides free permanent housing for those who lack family and financial support. Executive Director Mona Kafil says that the lack of finances, health issues often result in abandonment. It's okay to disagree on everything or how your parents have raised you, but putting them out on the street is against our faith and against our morals and ethics, says Kafil. She adds that her organization has been receiving information that people are on their own and need help. The Texas Muslim Women's Foundation was founded in 2005 and primarily focuses on assisting domestic abuse survivors. Texas has the 5th largest Muslim population in the U.S. and one of the fastest growing. A Norwegian anti-Islam extremist car crashed minutes after burning a Quran. Details after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, Does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Assalamu alaikum! Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. In international news, on Saturday, the leader of an extremist Norwegian anti-Islamic group was in a car collision minutes after burning a copy of the Quran on the outskirts of Oslo. Norwegian police said that they arrested 2 people, including the driver of a car, accused of deliberately ramming the SUV of Lars Thorsen, leader of the radical group Stop the Islamization of Norway. The handful of activists then placed a burning copy of the Quran in the middle of a small intersection, initially managing to push back local people who tried to put out the flames. Scandinavians' far-right anti-Islam activists have made a speciality of burning copies of the Quran in neighborhoods with large Muslim populations in recent years. Noam Chomsky and Mahatma Gandhi's grandson Rajmohan Gandhi have joined 4 international organizations to condemn India's incarceration of scholar and activist Omar Khalid. Hindus for Human Rights, Indian-American Muslim Council, Dalit Solidarity Forum, and India Civil Watch International have called for Khalid's immediate release. The activist was arrested in September 2020 over what Delhi police has claimed is his role in the Delhi pogrom. Police have attempted to connect his lead in organizing protests against India's Discriminatory Citizenship Amendment Act to the violence. In a recorded statement, Chomsky said the only credible evidence that has been presented that he was exercising his constitutional right to speak and to protest. He also noted Khalid's case is part of the large-scale governmental effort to dismantle India's honorable tradition of secular democracy and to impose a Hindu ethnocracy. Gandhi, who's a research professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, also issued a video statement similar to Chomsky's. He highlighted Khalid's scholarly contributions as a doctoral student at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He said in Khalid, India possesses one of its finest minds, reinforced by a sensitive conscience. This brilliant young son of India has now been silenced for 20 continuous months. He added Khalid's continuing silencing is a blotch on India's image in the world and a hurdle to India's progress. Earlier this year, Khalid was placed on the USARF's religious freedom prisoners list, largely due to efforts by human rights organizations such as Justice for All. On Monday, the U.S. State Department said Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was likely killed by Israeli gunfire, but it was probably unintentional. Independent investigators could not reach a definitive conclusion about the origin of the bullet that struck her, it said. Abu Akleh, a Palestinian-American, was killed on May 11th. The veteran Al Jazeera correspondent was the most recognizable face reporting on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Last month, the United Nations Human Rights Office said Abu Akleh had been killed by fire from the Israeli military. In response to the U.S. statement, Israeli human rights group Bet Shalom said that the odds that those responsible for the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh will be held to account are all but non-existent. It added, "Meanwhile, Israel's international impunity remains unchallenged." Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back. To discuss Arab-American Action Network's Suspicious Activity Report, let's go to Edward Ahmed Mitchell. Over to you, Edward.
Thank you, Hena. And now we move to Illinois, to Chicago, to discuss the release of an important and disturbing report about how the Muslim and Arab American community is being treated in that state. To discuss, let's bring on our special guest, Brother Mohammed Sankari, who is the lead organizer with AAAN, that's the Arab American Action Network. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mohammed. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam. I'm doing well today. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss this. Let's just start with a simple question. Tell us about the report. What's in it? What does it mean?
Yeah. So the Arab American Action Network, the organization that I work at, we just published a report which is free and accessible for everyone to download online. And I'll provide the link shortly. And this report is the culmination of really 7 years of work led by immigrant refugee women and youth aged 14 to 18, in which they were digging into what is going on, what are the tools that law enforcement is using to target our community. And we came to this thing that's called, this form that's called the Suspicious Activity Report. And it's through a federal program that's then passed down. This form, it was kind of created that was then passed down to states to use. And it's really to standardize data collection and gathering for all levels of law enforcement. This is everything from, in Chicago, we call it the CTA, so like the train, the mass transit cops, all the way up to the FBI and ICE. And they're using these forms to collect a massive amount of data on our communities, and then to process this data in these data warehouses called fusion centers, and there's 2 in the state of Illinois. And then that data is being then, first and foremost, it's being stored with the FBI for a minimum of 35 years in their eGuardian database, even if the analysts themselves say there's no credible threat. And then from there, it's being made accessible to all levels of law enforcement, including ICE, Department of Homeland Security, et cetera, et cetera. And so our report is digging into suspicious activity reports and really proving that it's being a tool, that it is a tool of racial surveillance, racialized surveillance that's targeting Arabs and more broadly, the Muslim communities or Muslim identified communities in Illinois.
So give us some examples, Mohammed, of stories that you uncovered of people being reported to this database. Why were they being reported? Give us some examples.
Yeah, I think, it was like, there's so many egregious examples, honestly, it's hard to just pick a few. One of them that sticks out in my mind, because I work with youth, I work with high school youth. There was a young student who was a Syrian American who goes to a suburban high school, who went and talked to his counselor just because he was distraught about the civil war in Syria and said that he wasn't going to be able to see his grandparents. And the counselor then tells the on-staff law enforcement officer at school, who then reports this to the Illinois State Police, who creates a suspicious activity report, and then actually follows up with the family. And we know this because it's written in the report, starts asking the family about what their affiliation to ISIS is and what they think and feel about ISIS. Understandably, the father, I believe, who is reported in this report to have answered the phone, is not interested in having this conversation, is like unclear as to why it's happening, and rushes the officer off the phone. And they then use that to say there's further suspicion that the father didn't want to have this conversation about what his connection to ISIS was. And all of this happened because a young person, 14, 15, 16, whatever they are, in high school, who was feeling distraught, went and talked to an adult who they should have been able to trust. And all of this snowballed out of control. That's one that was particularly egregious. I think another one, to me, that sticks out in my mind is there was a college student who had, there was a backpack that was recovered on campus. Someone forgot their backpack. The state police go through the contents of the backpack and find a sticker promoting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. And they use this as a basis to question the student and write a report about, could this be suspicious? Is there something deeper going on here? And a number of things that they start to dig into because of this student's political beliefs, and that their political beliefs, specifically promoting the human rights of Palestinians and speaking out against the Israeli apartheid and occupation. And the list really goes on and on and on. We could sit all day and I could recount the stories, and more of them are available in our report.
So let me ask you this, Mohammed, how did you get a hold of this data? Because what we found at the federal level is the government is very secretive about what exactly they're collecting and what they're doing with this massive information. How did you get a hold of this data and get it into the light of the public?
Yeah, I think you can appreciate this, knowing now that I know that you're an attorney. And we got it because of some really brilliant attorneys from the Community Activism Law Alliance in Chicago. That's their name at the time. Now they're called Beyond Legal Aid. And our attorneys, we filed a number of FOIAs, very well, if I may say so myself, very well crafted FOIAs. And unsurprisingly, probably to you and to many people listening, the police said no. This is privileged information, national security exemptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we sued. And our attorneys, again, I think did a very good job. We're very appreciative of them. They were able to push and say that there is public interest in knowing this information, and they can't just keep hiding behind the idea of national security. We were able then to secure the release of over 200 suspicious activity reports. Obviously, many of them were still heavily redacted, but even with the ones and the information that was not redacted, we were then able to prove our thesis here, which is that it's being used to target our communities.
So let me ask you this, Mohammed. So we've got this information, you know about what law enforcement doing. Now, what do you want them to do about it? Are you asking for this database to be shut down, or are you just putting this information out there so that others can take appropriate action? Well, what do you want to see done about this information?
Yeah, the AAAN, what we say is we're not a research organization. We do this research for a broader goal, which is we do community organizing. And what we believe is, without a stop, without any preconditions, the program of suspicious activity reports, first and foremost, needs to be ended in the state of Illinois. It is without a doubt, it is being used to racially profile communities of color in the state of Illinois. The data proves it, their own data. This is not my own conjecture. These are based on the reports from the Illinois State Police and the Chicago Police Department. So with that being said, suspicious activity reports immediately need to be ended in the state of Illinois. I'll take it a step further and say we believe that the very function of the fusion centers, which are these data sharing warehouses again, this raises very, very large red flags in our minds for people's civil liberties and civil rights and right to privacy. And we don't believe that the way that the fusion centers are functioning should be allowed to function. There should not be unlimited amounts of data sharing without any reasoning other than law enforcement agencies want more and more information. That is not enough. People's right to privacy, people's civil rights and civil liberties trump the government's want to collect unlimited amounts of data on us.
So, Mohammed, I know you all just had a tragedy in the state of Illinois just yesterday with this mass shooting, which was not perpetrated by an Arab American or a Muslim American, but a young white male, as numerous other terrorist attacks in our nation have been. Do we know what the breakdown of people is in the database in terms of their demographics Arab, Black versus white, et cetera, is there any indication that minorities are overly accounted for in that database? And what do you say to law enforcement agencies who say, well, look, we just need to, we're not doing anything with the information, we're not arresting them, we just need information so we can stop mass killings or mass shootings, so we can connect the dots. So what do you say to them in response to that argument?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think based on our analysis of the suspicious activity reports, the ones that are being processed by the Illinois State Police were about 53% of those reports were filed against people who were listed as Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, or olive-skinned. Those were the terms that we were able to pull out. In the Chicago Police Department's Fusion Center, it was like 49.3 or 49.6% of reports. So we're talking between both Fusion Centers, right about 50% of all of these reports being filed are specifically about Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, South Asian. If we then build it out further and say communities of color in general, people who are identified, in addition, I don't want to separate, obviously, I'm not saying that there's obviously a crossover between Black communities and Muslim communities. There's Black Muslim communities, obviously Muslims who are Black. So there's that in the reports as well, right? One of the SARs is of a Black Muslim woman who was taking photos. But when we look at all communities of color, we're now talking about 78% of the suspicious activity reports that are being filed. People of color are not 78% of Illinois state population. Arabs are not even 1.5% of the state's population. And so again, this proves without a doubt that this is racialized surveillance under the guise of quote unquote keeping people safe. To your latter point about the horrific tragedy that just happened, that was again carried out by a white male. And I'm not sure of his ideological motives, but what we do know is that he was a Trump supporter. And it's probably not a far reach to say that this man may be a white nationalist as well, which is a common theme in a lot of these horrific attacks. One of the things that has been brought up, I think, is to say, well, why don't we have counterterrorism programs that focus on the terror threat of white American males? And I just want to caution us in this, because what we've seen time and time again is that an expansion of terrorism budgeting or an expansion of terrorism programs, no matter what they're under the guise of, inevitably reinforce the existing racial profiling systems that exist today. And we know that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and the local police are targeting communities of color. And so pumping money in and pushing to expand these programs in hopes of catching these radical fringe right-wing Nazis and racists that are murdering people, I believe is the wrong approach. And what we actually need to do, truly, honestly, is begin to think about what is at the root cause of this issue that's happening in the United States. Why is this a uniquely American problem in which we have massive amounts of gun violence and that's being perpetrated? And the answers to that are not just counterterrorism programs. The answers to that are sociological. These are like sociological questions we need to answer. There are economic solutions, there are social solutions, and also I think there are solutions in terms of understanding who and how people are able to get guns and what it means, including law enforcement officers, frankly, what it means for people who have violent histories, including law enforcement officers, to be able to continue to buy weapons to kill people with.
So last question for you, Mohammed, any reactions? I know the report just came out. Any reactions so far from local political leaders? Do you expect, for example, the city of Chicago, which you would think would be somewhat responsive to the concerns of minority groups, any expectation that you'll see some positive action or at least some investigation into how this database is being used, abused, misused?
Yeah, we believe that that our role is to force them into action. You would hope that political leaders would be responsive to their constituents, but we've seen time and time again, especially in Illinois and especially in Chicago, especially when it comes to policing, that our political leaders and the established governing system will bend over backwards to defend police officers in their most egregious and horrific abuses. And Chicago was the torture capital of the United States, the police torture capital of the United States, by John Burge, the Midnight Crew, and others in the 80s. And we're still going, to this day, 40 years later, we still don't have everyone who was tortured by John Burge out of prison, even though we know that they were tortured. So that being said, we believe that power will concede nothing without a demand, and a mass mobilized community to exercise their rights, to demand that we shut down suspicious activity reports and we really change the nature of policing as a whole in this country.
Mohammed, I want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing details about this report with us. Where can people go to download and read the report?
They can go to AAAN.org/CERP-report, and that's Campaign to End Racial Profiling-report. If that's hard to remember, they can also just go to AAAN.org, and there should be a link right there on our homepage.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mohammed. We appreciate it, and we look forward to having you back to discuss next steps in response to this groundbreaking report. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we'll send it back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Edward. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.